Hi, this is Ken Parker, welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable, where we bring together a panel with diverse views on issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to our show, let's review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, or in this case, the virtual table, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of each segment, I put in my 2 cents on the topic and give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. Ordinarily, we limit the show to about 3 topics, but we have such a fabulous panel and so much to discuss. We're going to try to cram in a couple more topics, and we may, if we have time, hear from President Lincoln with some remarks from his first birthday, this being the eve of February 12th, President Lincoln's birthday. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's absolutely fabulous panel. First, we have Bob Burke. Bob is, I think, a member of the area council of, is it the Newton Highlands Area Council, Bob?
That's right, that's it.
And also, Bob is a former member of the Environmental Protection Agency and a Democratic Party activist and former Bernie Sanders activist. Did I leave out anything important there, Bob, or get anything wrong?
That's about it.
Bob, thanks so much for being on the show. You bring a terrific perspective. Also, I should say, you're almost an unofficial historian for the city of Newton. You've been here so long and know so much about what's happened over the years. So I think before the end of the show, I believe we may get a quick story from Bob about a really interesting event that happened maybe probably 2 generations ago now. The next panelist we have is Matt Hills. Matt has a very impressive Newton resume as well. Matt is the former chair of the Newton School Committee and is currently serving, I believe, on the Massachusetts Board of Education. Is that right, Matt?
That's correct.
And Matt is always our go-to guy for finance issues because he's a professional finance guy. Matt, what's the name of your company?
So the private equity firm I was with was LLN Capital for many years, and I serve on a variety of public and private corporate boards now.
Wow. So a variety. We won't ask you to list them all in that case then. Anyway, thanks for being on the show, Matt. It's always a real pleasure to have you. And very excited, coming to us from the high mountains of maybe, is that Switzerland? I'm not sure. Are those the Swiss Alps in the background?
The Canadian Rockies.
Canadian Rockies. Okay, beautiful.
Okay.
Pam Wright is a member of the city council, and of course, an excellent member of the city council. Matt Hills reminds me to say, of course, as I said to Matt, everyone who comes on this show is excellent in all respects. And Pam is, of course, also an engineer. And Pam, do you want to tell us a little bit about your professional background? And
so I practiced for 20 years electrical engineering, and now I'm mostly volunteering in the schools, and I manage a few properties.
Great. Well, Pam, welcome back to Common Ground. We have a lot to talk about, so let's dive right into our first topic, which is, for some strange reason, we're having an election in March. As I understand it, of course, we're referring to the special election to fill 2 seats. This is what's really unusual about it. We occasionally have a special election in Newton to fill a seat on the city council, but we have a twofer this year. And of course, one is related to the tragic passing of my friend, I think friend to all of us, Jay Ciccone, who died far too young. And also then, of course, we have the ascension of Councillor Auchincloss, Jake Auchincloss, straight from the Newton City Council to the United States Congress, which is pretty impressive. But that created 2 vacancies on the city council. And therefore, we have a special election to fill those seats. And so I'm going to let Bob lead this discussion off. But the question is at least 4 people running for those 2 seats. One's at large from Ward 1, one's at large from Ward 2. So Jay Sacconi's seat was Ward 1. Everyone who lives in Newton can vote in that race. And then there's an at-large race from Ward 2. Everyone in Newton can vote in that race. So Bob, can you tell us who's running in these races and who you're supporting and why, and what your thoughts are on these races?
Like, the only one I've really known over the years has been Tariq Lucas, who was running for one of the seats in Ward 2. I also know Brian Barash, who's the other candidate. And they've both been very active in Newton politics for several years now in Newton civic life. And what I do know about Tariq that makes him a very interesting candidate. First of all, he'd be the first, if he's elected, he'd be the first African-American member of the Board of Aldermen, now the City Council, in I think 34 years. And he has a union background. He came from Boston. His family moved to Brookline, so he was in the Brookline school system. And he went to Springfield College and got a degree and moved to Newton 9 years ago. He rents here, as does Brian. Both of them rent. That's kind of an interesting phenomenon here. But
they're both renters. Wow.
they're both renters, and they're what's both of them have done good things for this city. I think this type of thing. I'm with Tariq in this election because I've worked with him on several things, and there are certain traits that he has that are very, very almost unusual. And I think the first is he's a very independent-minded person, and he's been a member of the Newtonville Area Council, and he was vice president of that council, and he has since been appointed to the Newtonville Local Historic District. We tried to get one on the Highlands, we never did. And he has worked with a group on that. I'm very impressed with the work they've done on that. The whole committee, the whole historic district has done, because they haven't been rigid about adhering to historical things. I like this flexibility. I like Tariq's flexibility.
So that's Tariq Lucas you like in the Ward 2 race. Have you given any consideration to the other one, or I can ask the other panels to? I believe, just so my understanding is that in the Ward 1 race, there's John Oliver and the other person, is it Maddie? I don't want to get it, or Madeline. I'm not sure. Do people know what the full name of that candidate is? Matt, do you know what her the one running against John Oliver in Ward 1?
Maddie Rinaldi.
Rinaldi. So those are the candidates in Ward 1. Well, so Bob, do you have any thoughts on? I'm going to go around the table, as it were, to hear people's thoughts on both races.
I'm with John Oliver, but I know Maddie too. I think they're both wonderful people. They're both very civic-minded people. I'm with John simply because I'm looking for independent voices on the council. My problem has not been. I don't really see necessarily two sides here, because there are people who are on the other side of the development issues that I am, that I really respect a lot of things they've done for this city. But I think there's a mindset and in this city that
Thanks, Bob. I want to see what Matt's thoughts are on these things, and then on these races, and then we'll continue around the table.
So I'm very supportive of John Oliver in Ward 1 and Tariq Lucas in Ward 2. And I think there's some key words that Bob said that I would emphasize: sort of flexibility, independence. What I see in John and Tariq are two candidates who are not ideologues, not polarizing, who don't take every single issue, run to the extreme, and pound their fists on the table, and who are looking for ways to bring consensus or agreement of as large a number of people as possible, not just 50% plus one. I am a moderate Democrat. I have voted exactly for exactly 3 Republicans in my life. I have Democratic values, but one thing I value a lot is moderation. I can disagree with Tariq and John on issues, and it's like you disagree and you move on to the next issue. I am watching this city council, and even on issues where I have some sympathy with changes that are trying to be made, all I see is polarization. All I see is running to the extremes. We can't talk about zoning without, for 6 months, going to one of the most radical proposals in the country. We can't talk about development without immediately one side accusing the other of being, having bad intents and being selfish. We can't talk about finances without angry shouting, and don't even get me started on school reopening and how, that's become a polarized
Well, I'll get
issue.
you started on that later in the show, but
Moderation is not simply an ideology. Moderation is a useful political skill that enables a city to move forward together instead of constantly battling and wasting time. I'm sympathetic to a bunch of the things that were in the zoning proposal, but oh my God, were people who never get involved in local politics, activated and angry about it. So magically it just disappears until after this and then the November election. That's not really healthy for a local community. And we need people who can bring the temperature down, who are not screaming at the top of their lungs in the most angry, vitriolic way to defund the Newton police. That's why you need people like John and Tariq.
so are you saying that their opponents support defunding the Newton police?
I think there's a range of view that both of their opponents have stated both publicly and privately. And yeah.
Wow, that's okay, well,
I won't say that each of them has been as public as the other on defund. One has been unbelievably out front and vitriolic. The other is campaigning aggressively with that
so
candidate.
just to be clear, the only one I've heard of the two say that they support defunding the police is the opponent of John Oliver.
That's correct.
One.
And Tariq's opponent is campaigning arm in arm, joined at the hip with her.
Okay, I mean,
we all make choices, right?
sure. No, I just want to make sure we don't.
No, I'm agreeing with
something
you.
I haven't heard, then put it out there. That's fine. But
No,
I will say that
we've both described it correctly. When two candidates on that critical an issue when two candidates sort of just are campaigning together, that's a data point. One candidate is a very aggressive spokesperson for defund the Newton police. Really, really.
And they're running as a team, essentially.
Not reform, not let's talk about things, not let's think about things. Angry. That's not good for this community.
Right. Well, so I'm just, you're saying that reflects on Tariq Lucas's opponent, because that's Mr. Barash, because he's running on a team with Ms. Rinaldi, essentially.
Not essentially, exactly.
Okay. No, I think that's a fair point. I hadn't thought of that before. I wasn't going to paint Mr. Barash with that brush, but you make a legitimate, fair point.
Well, I'm looking for leaders who, whether you agree or disagree, know how to move a community together through difficult issues, not have to look at every issue as a zero-sum game and a fight to the death.
Okay, let's hear from our sitting city councilor, Pam Wright, on this one. Pam, what do you think about these candidates in these races?
So I'm supporting both John Oliver and Tariq Lucas. And my main reasons why: they're independent voices, they're open-minded, they'll listen to residents. What's interesting is both of them are belong in with the youth sports as refs, as coaches, things like that. So they're used to dealing with people and trying, consensus and talking to people. And, I really like that. And both of them have done a lot of service to the city. John Oliver right now is sitting on the Newton North PTO, and
as co-president.
Co-president, yes. And Tariq is in the Newtonville Historic District right now, and he was on the area council. And I actually, when I ran last year, and I did a lot of events with Tariq, and he is such a hard worker. I forget how many miles he logged, but he went and covered most of the city going door to door. It was like unbelievable how much he put the rest of us to shame, how much he covered during that time. He's a very hard worker, and I would be very happy and proud to be serving with both of them.
Yeah, I guess I'll weigh in quickly on this. I think find it really interesting that people from almost opposite ends of the Newton political spectrum, people like Bernie Sanders, liberal kind of like Bob, and a moderate Democrat like Matt, come out to the same place. And I'm also a Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren kind of Democrat. I'm not sure exactly where you are, Pam, on that spectrum, but I also came to the same conclusion on these races. But interestingly, for fairly different reasons, I think, than Matt and Bob. To me, I mean, it's certainly important to have people who are thoughtful and reasonable and can build consensus. But I like to see people who've accomplished things. I mean, to me, like the accomplishments that both of these people, that Tariq Lucas went out there and when there was a real threat to Newton democracy, they were trying to eliminate the district councilors, and he was out front in doing something about it. So that kind of effectiveness, and frankly, I think it does matter that we haven't had an African American on the city council in more than 3 decades, and people give lip service to diversity. Tariq Lucas is the epitome of would be the epitome of diversity on the Newton City Council, the first African American since Matt Jefferson. I think that's important to have not only the racial diversity, but the diversity of viewpoint that he represents. And I do agree with Matt that he's a real independent thinker, and with Bob and Pam's points. But the thing that gets me excited about him is, and this is true of both him and John, is that they represent to me the embodiment of the principle articulated in the environmental movement of think globally, act locally. I think they have shown an ability to act locally. John, in preserving parks, when there was a park that came under threat, he didn't just complain like some of us sometimes do. He went out and went to save that park from development and led a successful effort. They both have some real accomplishments under their belt, and they both think about these things from a global perspective. The other thing that I know is a reason to support them both is when I talk to a leading environmentalist like Emily Norton, who is the head of the Sierra Club and now head of the Charles River Watershed Group, and we talk about how we can fight global warming here in Newton, and she says the way we can do it is to help elect people locally who will help with the efforts that she's led on these issues. And I know Pam has been one of those people leading these efforts as well. And to hear people like Emily and Pam supporting Tariq Lucas and John Oliver means a lot to me, because I know that they'll be part of that team doing local things to fight global warming and climate change. So those are my reasons why I'm on board supporting these candidates. But it does sound like we've got a ton of common ground on this topic. So let's move on to our second topic. So Pam, we've had you on before trying to explain to us what the heck is going on with the so-called zoning redesign, which honestly I found baffling in that I don't understand what it's trying to accomplish. People said at first it was supposed to codify the way zoning really was in Newton, and like here's the way the actual structures are, and we want to make the zoning laws consistent with that. But that went out the window when they created new districts and changed district lines. Then people were talking about creating more affordable housing, but you look at the actual plan and it would make Newton less affordable. So what's going on with zoning redesign, Pam? You're on the committee. Please explain. I'm really confused. What's the point of it? What's it doing?
It has been confusing. So this year, they've been doing zoning redesign over roughly 10 years. And this past year, the decision was made by the planning department and a few counselors is we'll get rid of our zoning and rezone the entire city with a hybrid type of zoning. But so then we did the residential districts this whole past year, and there were a couple of items in it that a lot of people got very excited or concerned about. And those items were allowing any new build to be a 2-family and allowing up to 6 units in an existing house to reconfigure a house up to 6 units. And there was a lot of pushback in December. And so what was Councilor Crossley said is we're going to take those 2 ideas for the entire city, because it was going to be for the entire city. We're going to take it off the table for this year. So to me, that means, okay, we're going to talk about it next year, but we're still going to talk about it near village centers and near transit centers. And so building two units by right and doing a conversion up to
this is something I've never understood, because they talk about what's near village centers. Newton's got 13 villages, right? Everything's near a village center. I mean, you draw a half a mile circle around village centers, you're not missing much of the city, I don't think. What does that even mean?
Yeah, so it hasn't been defined. What it was defined is the more suburban areas wouldn't be touched in this area, but the rest of the city would. And those definitions is very ambiguous, hasn't been defined. So then the last time now, we're going to take the residential districts and we're going to push it aside for a little bit. And we're going to attack zoning based on geography. So we're going to be doing
mountainous regions of Newton are going to be treated. Yeah. What is that? I am so confused. What are they trying to accomplish? Could someone just please explain what?
So originally, it was all about diversity and affordability. And as you pointed out, and my data has shown, what they proposed is not bringing in diversity and affordability. Just
you were on this program, showed it would be tear downs and monster houses, these $1.7 million. There's a couple across the street from me they just built. That's not affordable. And there's fewer affordable units when you can do things by right, because you don't need to put the inclusionary units in if you're building by right. So that's out the window. So what's their new thing? If they're not trying for affordability, what are they going for?
Well, it's attainability now, and then making vibrant villages, which we all want vibrant villages. So we're going to be going after the villages right now. And, you're looking at mixed use with mixed use on the first floor, commercial on the first floor and a couple of stories above it for residential housing. So we're going to be looking at that next.
So I just to understand, are they saying take the existing commercial districts and add residential, or are they saying allow denser commercial? What are they? I mean, there's really you can't make things less dense because that's you've got grandfathering of the old zoning. Yeah. All you can do is add density, and in adding density, you've got 2 choices, right? You can add residential density or commercial density. Which are they trying to do, or both?
Residential in the village district. So your first floor, for the most part, would be commercial, and then above that will be residential.
Clear, they want to add residential units into commercial districts, so there'd be less. The ratio of residential to commercial would increase in this plan.
Yes.
Okay.
And right now we do have a few vision plans, like the Washington Street Vision Plan. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't have the zoning code that goes with it. So there's a couple of projects coming in, and they're using the other zoning. They're doing spot zoning, which is what we don't want. And hopefully we can do the zoning so that we don't have to do the spot zoning, which actually doesn't is taller than what's in the vision plans.
So that's funny. Spot zoning, of course, legally is illegal. I mean, it's a technical term for something illegal. I'm sure they're not calling what they're doing spot zoning, because you're not allowed to do that. They must be calling it district or something else, because that's
they're looking at it by lot. Someone comes in with a project and they need to change the zoning for that lot. I mean, there's one in the Highlands. There's
I'm aware of zoning changes they proposed in, they came, well, Bob would know all about this. They just came before the Newton Highlands Area Council and talked about one of these things. I, to this day, do not understand what the point of the so-called zoning redesign is. I want to let the other panelists react to what Pam said, and see if they have anything on this. Other than that, we've got a lot of topics to get to, but I thought the update to keep our viewers informed would be helpful. Bob, Matt, you have any thoughts on this before we move on to our next topic?
Just very quickly, I will confess that I have not read all the documents or gone to every meeting or everything, because I just don't know where this whole thing is going. And I'll have Pam and the others give me the Reader's Digest version when we get out of it, because I have no idea where this is going. I just think the benefits of high density transit-oriented development have been so oversold, particularly in this area, because you build up a lot of stuff and the public transit system is just not going to be able to handle it here. They can't handle what we already have. And I just don't see the improvements happening, particularly after the pandemic. That's put another wrench in the fire. And I don't want to see the entire Newton Highlands Village Center destroyed, leveled, and something new put up, because I think a lot of that can be preserved and built on if people are careful about it, because that has a real possibility, is a real community gathering place. And I just don't want to see that lost. I know the people in Auburn feel the same, and I just think there are other factors, and I'll leave it at that, because let's move. I'll move on.
Thank you, Bob. Matt, any thoughts on this?
Just a quick thought. There's parts to the zoning changes from what I understood of it that I'm actually quite supportive of, but this is also a very political process, political in a good way. You have to have buy-in from the community. And if I were to write a script as to how to polarize an issue, activate people who rarely pay attention, and alienate as many people as possible, that's what was done over the last 6 months. And I would just say to my friends on the city council who are trying to push something through, sometimes you need to listen, not just go through the motion of letting someone finish talking, but listen and moderate your views a little. This gets back to Tariq and John. Moderation, listening, not supporting the most radical proposals. You need to be able to act like you care what people in the community think, not like you are here as God's agents put on earth to do his will. And that's too often the way I feel some of the folks supporting the most radical zoning proposals act. And as a result, in case there was any doubt in your mind how it would end up, if they ever by some fluke got to the point of making the more radical changes, this could be like the charter referendum, Charter 2.0. It's going to go, I mean, some of the strongest supporters of zoning reform, who are the most politically astute, will make this exact same point. You need to start smaller and in village centers, because if you go for the most radical proposal in the country, it's going to get voted down. We wasted years getting nowhere on the charter.
Yeah, I'm gonna make 2 quick points on this before we move on to our next topic. One is the way zoning works is fundamentally contrary to the way they're approaching this issue. Zoning is, you've got districts and you've got a map, and what they're talking about is changing the lines and changing the rules of the districts. What that creates is nonconformity every time you move a line. The way zoning reform should work is you say, here are the lines, and within this district, we're going to change the rules to allow something we didn't previously allow, to encourage something, or we're going to take a property which was in one district and move it to another district. You don't throw out the whole map, because your new map creates massive nonconformity. And fundamentally, that's unfair, because zoning is a contract between people who move into a community and buy a property and their neighbors. And what you want to have is some stability and some certainty. And we're going to have far less stability now, because now you can change, you can give exceptions to the zoning by a simple majority vote, as opposed to the previous 2/3. So already we're losing stability that way, because the legislature passed that as part of the governor's package. and now we're going to have another layer of instability by randomly redrawing lines. That's my first observation. My second observation is simply that if your goal is to add housing to village centers, then what you're going to do is you're going to fundamentally shift the ratio of residential to commercial. And commercial is a rateable. Businesses provide services that Newton residents enjoy. They provide jobs, and they provide the vitality that people want. We become more of a sleepy bedroom community and less vital. If our goal is to become Weston, we would get rid of the commercial. If our goal is to be Newton and to have village centers with services, we don't want to convert all these village centers from commercial to residential. So before we go down the road of writing a new zoning code, why don't we figure out what our goals and objectives are? I think we're doing this backwards. Let's build a community consensus, as Matt says, for objectives, and then come up with the technical language. Right now, they're doing it the other way around. They're coming up with technical language and deciding, let's do a new map and new zoning districts before we figure out what the heck it is we're trying to accomplish. So I want to, but I don't know if we had common ground on that or not, but let's go on to the next topic.
I think we do.
I think we've got some common ground on that one. I don't know if, but I'll tell you, here's one thing that's got me really upset now, and I'm delighted we've got a sitting city councilor to talk me down from this one, because and Matt, who's on the Board of Education and knows a lot of it, it seems to me that Newton is handling the pandemic response. I'm just going to put it out there in a suboptimal way. I'm trying to be nice about this, but I don't understand, for example, I mean, part of it's the state's fault, right? The state, I mean, is, for example, not vaccinating teachers early enough in this process, I think. And just as we're starting to try to get this thing under control and we've got vaccines being rolled out, not very well, but vaccines being rolled out, at that same time, the governor has said he's lifting the cap from 20% to 40% capacity for restaurants and gyms and other indoor facilities. So to his credit, Joe Curtatone, the mayor of Somerville, said, not on my watch. And they're in Somerville staying at 20%. Why are we creating breeding grounds for new variants of the virus when we're so close to the finish line of getting this under control? And the vaccine rollout's a whole nother thing. It doesn't seem like we're doing that well locally. So I'm frustrated by what I see. Pam, am I wrong? Are we doing, or Matt, I know you've got some knowledge. I'll let you lead this one off. How are we doing in reopening in-person learning, getting teachers vaccinated, and getting and keeping the virus from mutating?
Well, there's a lot in there that I have no basis to talk about. Anything having to do with kind of, restaurants and health stand. I mean, Pam can speak about that. Mm-hmm. I would make one overall point, for the governor and the leader of any city or town. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of trade-offs involved. And different towns may have different experiences with how much, if at all, restaurants are a source of the spread. So I wouldn't completely overgeneralize. With respect to the schools, there's a lot of stuff that I see kind of, it's the Board of DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's the Board of Ed that I'm on. And there's a lot of stuff that I see with different school districts. And I would say when I look at Newton, comparing it to its neighboring districts, comparing it to its peer districts, comparing it to almost any similar district in the entire state, one of these is not like the other, and that one of these is Newton. It is just remarkable to me how a city with the financial and human resources that this city has not only struggled to reopen, but has exacerbated the problems, not just sort of with reopening in general, but with the teachers, and sort of the workforce in Newton. It's just stunning to me. And at the end of the day, after a few years of an openly, avowedly, often said pro-union chair of the school committee, and a mayor who's taken a certain approach with respect to the union, after all that, we have by far the worst labor relations we've had with our education unions since the work to rule in 94, 95. And meanwhile, we opened our high schools finally for a little bit of in-person learning over the last 2 weeks. In other districts, they call that September. In our districts,
Okay, Matt, let me just hone in on this point, because this people say, oh, well, we've got to get the economy going. To get the economy going, you need people to not be watching their children all day. How is it that kindergartnens are having online education in the city of Newton? Elementary school students are sitting at a computer, and unless you are independently wealthy and can afford an au pair or a babysitter of some kind to watch your kids watch TV or sit at a computer all day, you can't work and get the economy going while you're home with your children. Why is not the very first thing, along with the medical first responders, why don't we vaccinate teachers and get the kids, at least elementary school kids, back in the classroom? You're on the State Board of Education. Why are you not screaming to the governor if you're not? Get the teachers vaccinated now. Don't move them down the list.
So I will say this, just remember it's the Board of Ed. It's not sort of the Department of Health and Human Services that I'm with, but the data on the need to vaccinate. I understand this is a very controversial point with teachers groups out there. The data on the need to vaccinate teachers, let alone students, is nowhere near what you're saying it is. When the head of the CDC, Newton's own Newton Public School parent, Rochelle Walensky, makes crystal clear last week that schools can reopen as long as protocols are in place without vaccinations having to come first of teachers and students. Far be it from me to say, I'm sorry, Rochelle, you're just wrong.
Okay, Matt.
So
let me be
just
clear.
hold on.
Let me be clear about my question.
You need to look at what other districts are doing. It's not as if Newton is where every other district is. Newton is standing alone in the pace and amount of reopening, and other districts have managed.
You're saying we're first. We're doing the best, right, Matt? We're standing alone, doing better than everyone else. Is that it?
Yeah, just my point. Newton exceptionalism. No. So you can sit there and say, why not this? Why not this one? And I would say, okay, let's just step back a second. If everybody else started doing something in September and October and is increasing the amount of in-person learning, and we're just stumbling to the starting line, barely, before you dive into any details, just step back a second. Which one of these is not like the others, and what does that tell you?
Matt,
in the process of doing this, we have so polarized and alienated a workforce that's going to take like a few years to rebuild. And by the way, we get contract negotiations again in 2 years.
Matt, just to be clear, I fully agree with you that even before there were vaccines, we should have had elementary school students learning in person. But given the situation where there's a perception among many teachers that they don't feel safe teaching until they're vaccinated, why are we not vaccinating teachers sooner? Why is this not a top priority?
Because so let's not call it not a top priority.
It is factually not.
It is not the same priority as frontline healthcare workers, A, B, over 75, C, over 65. Those are the priorities that the state has set.
And you agree with that?
I have no basis to agree or disagree. Like this is what infectious disease professionals have developed that the state's adopted. On what possible basis?
Different states have done different things. That's not factually accurate, Matt. That the states have. Massachusetts has adopted something.
I'm talking about Massachusetts. Given the shortage of vaccines here, we should expect nothing less than the prioritization of folks who get those vaccines. And, you're arguing for something that the head of the Center for Disease Control has a different point of view than you are. I'm not going to sit here and weigh in on a medical issue.
Matt,
I would
I
be
appreciate
really careful overruling what the CDC says.
Matt, I think that you and I need to step back from this because I don't think you have an accurate set of data if you think that I disagree with the center of the CDC. I agree with the CDC. I disagree with Governor Baker, who I think has rolled this out incompetently. However, I want to get to the rest of the panel and move on around the topic. So Pam, how is the city of Newton doing in your view? I'll shut up about my view.
There's a lot of different areas. I mean, we've been very hard hit by COVID, and there is support out there, rental assistance, help paying, utility bills, and people can contact the city. They could contact me, I can forward it on. But there's other areas, the schools do really bother me, and they've fallen down multiple times. Just take ventilation. They didn't start to look at the ventilation in the buildings until September, while a lot of other districts were already done. My kids went to Franklin. It was built, I think, in the 1920s or 30s. They have radiators. There's no ventilation there. And there are a few schools like that. There's a lot of work. My sister, she works for the Weston school system, and they got their elementary school kids in 5 days a week. What helped them is that their classrooms were bigger, so they can keep that distance, and not as big of a percentage of students wanted to go back. So they could get everyone in every single day. But what they also did is, they have air purifiers with HEPA filters in every classroom, 1 or 2. When we started out and we brought, the city different departments in and talked about the schools, they said, well, we'll offer classrooms a fan. And, I asked, so do they blow the air in? Do they blow the air out? Do you have 2 windows open, cross circulation? They didn't know. And it was just like, if they wanted a fan, they could have a fan, which isn't really using the science and information on working on this. And from the city council perspective, it's the mayor, the superintendent that are really controlling the process in the schools. The city council provides the money. And we have said over and over, if you need money, we can help you, give you money and that. And they kept on saying, no, we're fine. But it's just been such a disconnect. And I really feel for all those parents out there. But also, if teachers feel safer and better, being vaccinated, I think we should do that. The same as testing. I mean, when you test someone, that's only that one moment in time. You could be infected 2 hours later. But if someone's going to feel better and do their job better, getting that weekly testing, then give it to them, because I think that will make it a better classroom too.
Thanks, Pam. Bob, do you have anything on this topic on the
I just think it's complicated by the fact there's so much fear out there about this thing that people. I mean, you can put all the data you want about how teachers and the students, particularly the elementary students, are safe in this environment. But if the teachers don't feel they're safe, that's a tough nut to overcome. I'll go for a little historical thing, not doing directly with the schools, but doing with an illness. It was the 1955 polio epidemic that hit here. And by the time school was getting ready to open,
Bob, your audio is pretty much broken apart. It sounds like It's almost
good. Is it good now?
Yeah, I think it's better. Maybe if you stay close to the microphone.
Okay, I'll do that. The board of health and the commissioner of health in Newton told the mayor, this is Howard Whitmore at the time, that it was safe for the kids to go back. But all kinds of fear spread through the community. And when the mayor went to the office on Monday morning, 2 weeks before school was open, there were 200 or 300 calls from parents that say, we're not going to send the kids. We're not going to send the kids. And they've been told time and time again, it would be safe to do it. And the mayor, which I think was correct, he said, look, I have 300 kids who aren't going to be coming, and I'm not going to start school for 2 weeks. early for some and not for the other, it'll be a mess. So we'll just postpone school for 2 weeks and see what happens. And that's what happens when the fear gets going. Often the thing, people are just deathly afraid of this thing,
Right.
and it we say we want real science, and I certainly do, but when people are frightened, they just don't listen to this.
Okay.
I think that's what's happened here.
Thanks, Bob. So I'm not going to put more of my opinion into this. I'm just going to read one fact. A study released this past November found that 20% occupancy limits at places like restaurants, gyms, and grocery stores reduced the number of new infections by more than 87%, while resulting in 42% fewer overall visits. The study found that 40% limits on those places resulted in a 58% reduction in infections and a 16% reduction in customer visits. So those are the data that I think the governor had in front of him when he made his decision to go back up to from 20 to 40% occupancy. And I will let others judge for themselves whether that was inane or merely stupid. No, just kidding. Whether that was brilliant or not so brilliant on his part. Let's hear from Abraham Lincoln now. As every time we have a show on Abraham Lincoln's birthday or close to it, I like to read like a little quote or an excerpt from one of his speeches that seems appropriate to the time. And of course, as in recent weeks with what's gone on in Washington, D.C., with the inauguration of President Biden, preceded, of course, by the insurrection attempt prompted by his predecessor on January 6th, the quote that and the speech that comes to mind is the one containing the famous quote, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." But what I want to quote is not just that line, but what follows it. President Lincoln wasn't saying that the country wouldn't survive. If you go a little bit beyond it, he says, "I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the House to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided." And that's the thought the optimistic thought that I want to take away from this great division we've had recently in our country, is that we are not going to stay divided. We've been through worse. This was the country almost ended last month, and just as it almost ended in the Civil War in the 1860s. We survived that threat to the country. We will survive this threat to the country as well. And hopefully, as my track coach used to like to quote, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." And hopefully American democracy, thanks Coach Omo, will come out stronger for this very scary chapter in our history. And thank you, President Lincoln, for inspiring the nation so many years after your passing. I want to quickly go around the table and just see, this is an election year. We don't only have, of course, this March 16th. I should have said it's a March 16th special election, but people can vote early, by mail, or in person at the library, I believe, in another. You can check the city's website. There are 2 seats up. You know, as I like to say, in a democracy, you get the government you deserve. So please vote. Please take charge of your city government by getting involved, whether you vote for the people that I like or the other people or some of each. But please vote on March 16th or earlier, given the pandemic voting conditions. But there's not just that election. There's this November election, and it's a mayoral year. And so far, I don't believe Mayor Fuller has an opponent. I don't think anyone's come forward, and it's looking to me more and more like no one will. But I'm interested in what the panel's assessment is of how she's doing, how her performance as mayor has been. not to oversimplify things, but I'm going to start out by oversimplifying things and asking each of the panelists to give her a rating on the scale of 1 to 10, 1 being pretty lousy, 10 being amazing and perfect. Just I'm gonna roll around the list once and see what people think. So Pam, what score do you give Mayor Fuller?
Probably a 3. So there's some things that she's done well, and I think helping people who have been hit by COVID, but really fell down with the schools. I didn't vote for her budget because I thought it was unrealistic too, and we'll be doing budget coming up again. I think she's too optimistic. So that's where I am. So, some of it would have been a 1, and then others, might have been a little bit higher. I just want to clarify a point. So if you want to vote by mail, you have to request a ballot. So they're not sending it out to people, and you can call up or request on the website. And I think the early in-person voting is at City Hall, because I think the library is closed right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you for correcting that. So go to the city website if you want.
Yeah, check it out.
But I misspoke when I said the library. That's where it was last time. But
yeah,
thank you, Pam, for that correction. And this is really important. Last time everybody automatically got a ballot. This is a great point, Pam. You're only going to get a ballot if you ask for one to be sent to you. So both of those are incredibly important points. Thank you. So I heard a 3 there from Pam rating the mayor. Bob, what do you think on a 1 to 10? How do you rate Mayor Fuller?
Well, I'd give her a 5. I'd give her a 5. I think she's been too friendly with the development people. I have trouble commenting on the schools. I've been out of the Newton schools now for 50, 60 years. It's hard for me to comment on them, or who's absolutely right in the struggle between the unions and the administration. Again, as I say, fear is a heavy motivator here, and but I will give her credit for one thing. She is much more popular in this city than a lot of people think she is. If we talk to people like us, we can see the flaws, but out there, people like her. They like her a lot, and I think people aren't running because I think whatever her shortcomings are, I think she'll be quite formidable.
She's obviously very formidable. No one's stepping forward to run against her.
That's right.
Apparently, people either nobody wants the job, which is probably partially true because it is a thankless job, or people think she's doing a good job, or they just don't think they could win. Right? 3 possibilities. Matt, what score do you give Mayor Fuller?
Yeah, this is a personally painful one for me. I've known Ruth Ann a long time. I supported Ruth Ann when she ran. I am unbelievably disappointed as to what her involvement and decisions have been with respect to the schools for 3 years, and her about face to a more polarizing view on a number of issues. About face from where she was all those years on the city council. It's personally painful for me. Painful is a little dramatic. It's troubling for me because of for how long I felt the two of us were so close. And I'm simply going to say some combination of incomplete and early disappointing. Whether she wins a second term or not, probably. I mean, because, there's a limit to how many.
You're not going to put a number on it.
Can't do it. But you could take my qualitative.
Well, you obviously are going to be able to teach, Matt, because no, I'm just kidding. You got to put a number on that exam.
It's I
know it's
what I say.
I know it's a gross
really disappointing.
I know it's a
and
gross.
We have financial. There's a lot of structural deficit that's readily obvious in the city's own budget stuff that it puts out. If you look at some of the detail, like you don't even have to do complications, you just have to look at it. And when money stops coming in from the state and federal government, when we're done with the stimulus packages, I think Pam and her friends on the city council are going to have one heck of an issue to deal with, particularly after the mayor's reelection, assuming it happens, is behind her and reality has to be faced. And that's just looking at their own documents.
Thanks, Matt. I'm gonna give it a number. I'm gonna preface my number by saying I'm being a little bit of a tough grader on Mayor Fuller because I think she's so smart and had so much potential. In particular, because I didn't think she was someone who was seeking higher office, so she was going to be able to lead. She was going to be able to do the right thing, and I had very high expectations for her, and I voted for her, and I think she's really been disappointing on the long-term financial issues where I really thought she'd be a terrific leader from her work on the Citizens Advisory Group and the other budget and management organizations and her MBA in finance and all of her impressive credentials there. And I also thought, frankly, that she'd at least lay out some thoughts and goals on where the city should be heading in terms of development. And I really haven't, I think I've been deafened by the silence. So I'm a little bit grading on a curve because I had such high expectations, but I'm going to agree with the 3 that Pam gave her because I think she could be doing so much better. She has the ability, she has the potential, and I really, really am rooting for her to live up to that potential. But so far, I feel like I can't go higher than a 3 based on her not achieving what I know she's capable of achieving. We only have about a minute left in the show. So I do want to let everybody, if we have in our final minute, if anyone has anything they want to say about the national situation in like 10 seconds or less. It's hard not to comment on an impeachment trial or to ignore it as it goes on as we speak. Bob, any thoughts on it?
Our country is in grave, grave danger. We dodged a bullet, but it's still there. The problem is still there. We're the only Western democracy, so-called democracy, that discourages people from voting, that prevents people from voting, that allows corporate interests to spend billions if they want to on lobbying and political campaigning. And it has an antiquated system for electing people. And I think we're in a lot of trouble.
Thanks, Bob. Matt?
It's been a rough few years for the country. We've gotten through it. We have tougher years ahead, but within the Democratic Party, which is near and dear to my heart, at the end of the day, the center has continued to hold and will continue to hold with President Biden, the center of the Democratic Party.
Pam?
I have hope. Yes, the last 4 years have been horrible and big relief, and we're moving on, and I have hope.
I will say, I believe that we are about to enter a new era of American prosperity that will dwarf anything that came before it. And people are going, right now, we're still in the darkness, but we can see the light, and we're going to be out in the light. And the Republican Party is already self-destructed. I'm hoping that what comes from those ashes is a responsible opposition party that where we can have a discussion of ideas. But what I believe is once people see President Biden's policies implemented, our economy is going to do well. We're going to protect the environment. We're going to have those electric cars and those carbon neutral cities. And we are going to be the best America we've ever been. And I'm so excited about it. So thank you all for being on the panel. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Brian, and everyone at NewTV for making the show possible. And thank you so much, everyone at home, for watching. Thanks for sticking with us in COVID times and goofy Zoom technology shows. And please, please join us again next time when we try to find just an itsy bitsy bit more common ground.